This episode of Tub Talk is brought to you by Avast Business. With over 435 million active users of Avast products, if you haven't already taken a look at what Avast Business is offering, now might be the time. Visit tublog.co.uk/Avast for all the links to the details. Right now, though, let's jump into our featured interview. Well, hello there. Richard Tubb back again with another interview, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Mark Copeland. Now, Mark, as well as being a Helpdesk superhero, is also the author of the wonderful book, Helpdesk Habits, From Customer Service Agent to Helpdesk Superhero in 50 Habits. We're going to jump straight into the conversation with Mark, but I want to start off, Mark, with a little bit of a quote, a famous quote from Maya Angelou that you actually included, or rather your foreword, Linda included in the book. Maya says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Wonderful quote to start the book. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk a little bit more about how you can make people feel good with customer service. Before we do, though, for anybody who's not familiar with who you are, perhaps you can give us a little bit of an idea of what brought you to the point in your career you're at there.
Hi, Richard. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been I think, varied career, as somebody said. Someone said the other day they've had more jobs than one of Vader's emperors, or no, more emperors, more lieutenants than Darth Vader, or something like that. Anyway, I kind of fit into that particular camp, and I'll get the quote right next time I actually say it. But my background, I had a couple of marketing agencies which I built up and sold. Part of that experience was starting to understand how clients were feeling about you, as an account manager, as an account director, as a business owner. I met a lady who had put a very simple system in place for her agency, which I was working for interim. And after she finished that agency, she called me up and she said, "Mark, do you fancy building this thing?" And I said, "No, I'm too busy. I'm having too much fun doing the agency stuff." But she persuaded me. And in 2010, we built from scratch with very little knowledge, Customer Thermometer, which was pretty much the first one-click feedback survey tool on the market. And it was actually originally aimed at the marketing agency space. But suddenly, kind of out of the blue, we started to have these things called MSPs signing up. And I'll be really honest with you, back in 2012, perhaps, whilst I had a big background in IT, I wasn't aware of the enormous community of managed service providers out there. And we actually pivoted the business and started to integrate with a lot of the PSAs and form relationships with them. And so I spent many years working with, literally hundreds of MSPs around the world about CSAT, about customer experience and so on. And it was just an absolute delight. I loved it. And I loved it because we were really able to help people make a tangible difference to what they were doing. And then I exited Customer Thermometer in 2018. I sat back, enjoyed the summer, the World Cup, and decided what to do next. And I was just sort of compelled, really. I've always wanted to write a book. Everyone always wants to write a book. But I thought, well, it's my time to do this. And so Helpdesk Habits was born, and off the back of that, the online program as well.
It's an incredible book. It sort of swept the MSP industry when you released it into this day. I remember reading it. It was probably about a year ago, a couple of months after it was released, and I just thought, it's one of those books I can't believe nobody had addressed this subject before. Now, I know the book itself, it can be used for anybody in customer service, really, can't it? And perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that. But from the MSP's perspective and from Helpdesk people's perspective as well, it was like, this is a book that needed to be written years ago, and it's only just been sort of published now. So congratulations on a fantastic book. I'm going to make sure that we include a link in the show notes for anybody who's not already read this. I would say this is absolutely required reading, though. What's the feedback been like to the book?
Well, amazing. I mean, obviously I'm going to say that, but I'm actually genuinely humbled by it, because it's very easy to sit, in your office and create. And I've done that all my life. And when you create, you don't really know if it's any good. You don't really know if it's actually going to make a difference. You hope it is, but you're never quite sure. And so it's not until you start receiving emails from people just saying thank you and wow, and this has made a real difference. That I actually got one, no word of a lie, about an hour before we started talking, from an MSP in the UK, and it's just a lovely thing to know. Cliche alert, but you are genuinely making a difference to somebody's business, and we had that with Customer Thermometer too. You create something and it spreads to the far corners of the earth. But when you get people saying to you, "Look, this is changing my business," and you've never met them before, you know this, Richard. You create enough content. It's just a lovely feeling, and it just you want to do more of it.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, again, congrats on the book. Right, that's the nice stuff said. I'm going to grill you now, mate. We're going to jump straight into it. So
come on then, Paxman. Come on.
So we've already, I've alluded to the fact this book is aimed at MSPs, but it's not just advice for service desk and help desk people, but the sort of things you talk about really are applicable if you're in account management, if you're in finance, marketeers, even HR, and so on and so forth. What is it about customer service that really gets you excited, and why does it span so many areas of business?
Good question, and yeah, you're right. I mean, I've certainly have MSPs. It's hard to know who the book's passed on to, but from the online program perspective, I've had MSPs buy licenses for the whole business, and they told me specifically, right across the business, they're going to mandate that it's done. And I think it's because, and I talk about this when I give speeches, but so often people are trained in their discipline. So if you are a technician, you'll go on a certification. You'll learn how a database works. You'll learn how to debug something. If you're an accountant, you'll do your accountancy exams. But for me, it's kind of assumed that people will know how to deal with customers. They'll know how to do and say and write the right things. But actually, the more I sort of dug into it, the more I realized, hang on a second, how often are we trained to do that? Everyone sort of assumes that we'll just do all those things correctly. And if you're not that way inclined, then you're not going to. And sometimes you need to be shown the way. In the same way you're taught how to do accountancy practices, you need to be taught how to deal with customers. And it's not, let's assume people know how to interact with people generally, but I'm talking about the little bits of detail which you may not realize can make a really big difference to people.
Isn't customer service intuitive though? Why? I speak to people and they say, yeah, that's common sense when we talk about customer service. Why do people not doing it? Why isn't it intuitive?
Well, I've always been intrigued by that question as well. And it's an IQ versus EQ thing for me. People they have their IQ is kind of set according to, people that really know by the time you're sort of in your early 20s. But the good news is that EQ, the emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, can actually go up as well as down, like your mortgage repayments, and it can you can affect that during the period of your life. So I think for some people, you say, isn't it just intuitive? But how often do you come off perhaps the phone to a generic call center, it's a utilities or perhaps a large TV satellite type company, and just go, oh, that was just the worst, and so if it's intuitive, then why isn't everybody doing it? They're not. It's as simple as that. However, you also think the opposite. When you've had an amazing experience and you put the phone down or you read the email, you celebrate it. You tell people, and you go, oh, wow, these guys are brilliant. There's sort of a natural reaction off the back of it. So, I don't think it is intuitive. For some people, I think it is. But not for probably the majority. And there's no science in that, Richard. That's just sort of years of experience and working with people.
Yeah, you're big on psychology though, aren't you? And habits in particular. I know,
I love
this is something you've done a lot of training on, and it's a personal passion of yours. How and why people do things. Why is that important to customer service?
It's important, and not just for customer service. You can apply it to any sort of walk of life, really. But it's important because the traditional way people learn, they'll read something, whether it be in a book, on video, whatever it may be, and they'll go, oh yeah, great. And, they'll pick up a tactic. And they may employ that tactic for, a week, 2 weeks. And however, if that tactic is kind of diametrically the opposite to what you're used to doing, what typically happens is that you will sort of fall back. It's like, reformatting your hard drive. You will go back to what you had previously learnt. Your body defaults, not your body as such, your brain defaults to its natural state over time, unless you take that tactic that you've learnt, you truly embed it, and you turn it into that habit. And once you've done that, and there is a very specific way of doing it, but once you've done that, it's actually incredibly hard to break. In the same way, it's incredibly hard to form a habit. But as you and I sit here right now, we are the products of our habits for however many years we've been on this earth, and I'm not going to reveal that. The things that we do and say every day, there's research out there, American universities that talk about 60% of our day is made up of unconscious thoughts. We just do what we do naturally without even thinking about it, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah. Now, you and I are both very, very familiar with the MSP industry. MSP industry is full of automation. We've got bots, we've got email responders, you've got all of this stuff going on to, I guess, try to grease the wheels of customer service and to make things better. Mm-hmm. But you talk quite a lot about human customer service. For anybody who's not familiar with that, what do you mean by human customer service?
Well, I guess I mean the opposite of the AI and the bots and so on. It is the human intervention. It's the, how can I put it, the non-process elements where human beings interact with other human beings, whether using voice or in the written word as well. And let me be clear. I'm not against AI and bots and technology. Far from it. I love all that stuff, but in the right place. So self-service help, for example, absolutely. That's got to be in place. Any SaaS provider out there that hasn't got really good self-service, with all the right sort of FAQs, knowledge base, all those sorts of things, they're missing a trick, no question. However, we have to be giving customers the option, wherever possible and however easily, to talk to real life human beings, or to be able to write to real life human beings and get a real life human being type response in a sensible time frame as well. So that's what I mean by human customer service. And I think to add to that briefly, people just crave authenticity these days. You get that sort of big sigh when you realize you're talking to a chatbot, and quite often these things, sometimes they dress themselves up and pretend to be human, and sometimes they say, "Hi, I'm a chatbot." Actually, I don't know which is worse, Richard. I don't know if I'd prefer it to be pretending or not. But either way, when you realize that you're dealing with a computer, and perhaps you've got a question which is a little bit tricky, and there is no way in the world some kind of decision tree is going to give you an answer, then it can be really frustrating, and you need that path through to a real person. For me, I just think that's such a differentiator. It's so important.
Yeah, agreed. There's nothing more frustrating than, getting through to a 12-layer customer telephone, press 1 for this, press 2. And it's like, I'm pressing the hash key as often as possible. Just put me through to a human being. I just want to get this done. And I'm already starting off the call then in a fairly, furious is not the right word, but a frustrated manner.
But that's a great point. That's an absolutely brilliant point, and because you're setting the tone for the conversation to start. And if I may, I'll give you another example of that.
Please.
And that is in a chat scenario where we're seeing that more and more, and it can be hugely convenient. It's brilliant. And then we're all consumers. We've all had experiences, good and bad, of these types of situations. But there is nothing worse for me. And I talk about in some of the workshops that I give and I've got brilliant screenshots, and I do try and protect the names. And let's face it, it's normally the bigger company where you've typed in your issue, your problem, typically perhaps something isn't right, because otherwise you wouldn't be hanging around on the chat. And the first thing that comes back is that automated response, going something along the lines of, "Hi, Mark, I hope you're having a great day. I'm really looking forward to helping you out right now. How can I help?" And you're just going, "No, I'm having a bad day because whatever it is you sold me isn't working. And here I am wasting my time trying to solve it." So it's about that empathy. It's about that first step. And it should really be, that response should really be, "Mark, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm going to get onto this right away. By the way, my name's Dave." And then bang, you're into the conversation. So tiny, subtle changes can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, lots of MSPs are going to be listening to this, and there's going to be lots of MSPs who, dare I say, struggle to find the right people to man their service desks, man their help desks. Mark, do you think that empathy, customer service can be taught to everybody, or does it take a certain type of person?
Oh, you're not the first person to ask me that. And if I'm going to be super honest here and say, I don't know the absolute answer. I think I'd be lying, or most people would be lying if they said there's a black and white answer to that. I've seen and I've heard from people that have been through the program and in other walks of life as well, that have gone through some kind of training program, to say that, you know, this particular individual, they've really changed. You know, they've really listened, they've really learned. And I guess this is a little anecdotal, but I guess most of those situations, people have been younger. Okay, if you're slightly older, perhaps even as old as me, you can see the grey hair, I think, on the webcam if you're watching this. It's harder to change, and it's harder to change because those habits that you've created, coming back to that, are more ingrained. So I guess I don't want to completely generalize on age, but I think it's a consideration. But I think it's about having a desire as well. You know, it's like anything in life. If you want to improve on something, first of all, you have to recognize you're perhaps not as good as you could be, and so you're going to go on your own journey of trying to figure stuff out. And I think if you've got that will inside you, and you have the right sort of program in front of you and support from your boss, the people around you, then you have a chance to change for sure. So there will always be some people who will struggle to embrace that customer service ethos, particularly if their real passion and their real interest is, deep and dark and dirty tech type stuff. And that's all they want to do. And I think sometimes you just have to accept that, if I'm really honest. But I'd like to think that's the minority. And maybe those sorts of people, you understand that, and you move them back behind the front line a little bit and let them utilize the skills as best they're able.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Do you think the same? I'm intrigued to know what you think to that. I do.
And actually, the reason that question was prompted was I was actually having a conversation with an MSP who have got a wonderful young person on their help desk, but the person keeps making the same mistakes again and again and again. And they actually said to me, when we hired this person, we felt like they had the right attitude, but they're just not clicking. And I'll be totally honest, I pointed them towards your book and said, because, and again, this is not, making you blush unduly here, but I've gone on record as saying, I think this Helpdesk habit should be part of every MSP's onboarding process. And the reason I say that is, in the book, you very masterfully sort of address the fact that not everybody who's on a help desk wants to be there. Some people are going to be there because they're passing through to job. Other people absolutely love it, and then some people are just going to see it as a stepping stone or something that just pays the bills. So I think regardless of who they are, the book is required for them. But to rewind a little bit, do you have any advice for people on, before they reach that situation where they've got a member of staff who's just not clicking? Have you got any advice how to hire people for their service desk and help desk who have got the right attitude?
Yeah, a few thoughts, and actually, some of these are borrowed from other. Who has an original thought these days anyway? Eh? So I'll there's a disclaimer right there for you. And in the process, and we may touch on it later, there's a second book on its way. And in the process of doing that, I was in a very privileged position of talking to so many different people. And one of the areas of this particular book is about recruitment. And typically in the help desk environment. So one of the first things to bring up is that certainly some of our colleagues in the States and actually here in the UK as well, I've had 2 or 3 conversations with MSPs here in the UK, are actively recruiting from the hospitality industry. Okay? So these are young people who have perhaps worked in restaurants, cafes, who have a fabulous demeanor. They're naturally good at doing and saying and writing the right things and working with customers, but they have absolutely no technical experience, or at least a very, very low level. And they're investing in those people, and they are putting them through certifications, and providing they've got a certain level of ability to take on that sort of knowledge, they are working out incredibly well. So that's a bit of a sort of a curveball, and it may not work for everybody. And I can't sit here and say, look, that's the answer. But particularly, certainly places like San Francisco, for example, where there is an incredible tech shortage, because the employment rate is so high, it's really, really hard to find good people. So that's one angle, hospitality. Another angle, because I'll try and keep this brief, but part of the recruitment process, and I find this one is mind blowing, and I was quite shocked when I talked to this particular lady about it. Once she's brought somebody on board, 2 weeks into her very, very structured induction program, she offers them a sum of money to leave. You've heard this before.
I've come across this with a big company, Zappos.
Okay.
Yeah, Zappos, I offer, I think it's $500 or $1,000 for somebody to leave.
I see, off the top of my head, I think it was a couple of $1,000 that this particular lady who runs this business in the States, she was offering. That was the first thing that she did. The second thing she did, or does, as part of this induction program, is to give these new recruits homework, once, 2-3 times a week, whatever it is. And if they do not come back the next day, and it's small, it's not big, but if they don't come back the next day with something really worthwhile and valuable, she fires them. Wow. And she does that because if they fall at this very, very simple hurdle early on in their career, what's going to happen further down the track? It's just going to get harder and harder to fire them. They're clearly not the right people. So it's like, wow, okay, that's a really interesting approach, but it really does work for her. So hopefully there's something in there of interest.
There is. That's great feedback. And my friend and our fellow MSP author, Carl Palachuk, told me when he ran an MSP and he was recruiting members of staff, his was a very system and process driven business. And so you could be the best technician in the world, but if you couldn't follow systems and processes, you were going to fall out with them. And so during the recruitment process, when he asked people to send a cover letter in, he asked them for a cover letter and a link to their MCP, their Microsoft Certified Professional transcript. And he said the amount of people who sent in the cover letter without the link or sent in the cover letter with the transcript, and he said, no, they were dismissed immediately because it was very, very clear on the letter that they sent, inviting them for an interview. Before we go ahead with this, I want you to send a cover letter and I want you to send me a link to your MCP transcripts. Now, it sounds such a small thing to do, but he said it really did wheedle out the people who were able to follow instructions and those who just thought they knew
detail. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to jump into something that you mentioned in the book, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Talk to me a little bit more about customer loyalty and the service recovery paradox.
One of my favorite habits, actually, Richard. And I think it's one of my favorites because we've all experienced this. Perhaps we don't know this term, but if I explain it briefly, I'm sure people will relate to it. And it's as simple as this. If a customer experiences a problem and you deal with that problem exceptionally, that customer will become more loyal to you over time than if the problem hadn't happened in the first place. And it's best shown in a graphical format, but we're just words and pictures here today, so that's okay. But look it up online. You may even discover one of my posts on it. I don't know, but it's fascinating, and I have had a huge experience of this particular one. And one of my personal experiences, just to sort of illustrate the point, And then I'll also explain how I think you can help form the right sort of habit around this. But we were about 3 months into launching Customer Thermometer. It was very, very early days back in 2010. And we had a massive problem, we only had a handful of customers at the time. And a big FTSE 100 client was one of our first. They put their trust in us. And they did something with the server. They tried to send too many things out, and we hadn't thought about that. And it went a bit wrong. And it was a call on a Friday afternoon. It was a sort of call where you literally wanted the ground to swallow you up. And we've all been there, and you have to have this as part of your sort of life experience, I think. We shut the service down. It was that bad because we had to figure out what went wrong. And we worked tirelessly all weekend to figure it out. And on Monday morning, literally knees knocking under the desk, I had to report back to a bunch of lawyers and goodness knows who, because I really thought we were in all sorts of trouble here. It was a 20-page report, everything detailed, what we were going to do about it and so on. And when I left the business 8 and 7 years later, they were one of our biggest customers, and it had spread right across the organization. And I still believe to this day, and we were told it was the best remedial report they'd ever seen. And because we worked so hard at fixing the problem, they were indebted to us. They showed real gratitude. And so what I always remember about that, and the habit I talk about in the book, is we all suffer these pits of despair, as I like to call it on the graph. If you think forward when you're in it to 2, 3, 4, 5 days time, when you know that this is not going to be an issue anymore because you would have dealt with it, it helps your state of mind. It helps you remove the emotion from it, and it helps you to remember how you're going to feel in a few days' time when the customer is absolutely delighted with you. So I bet you've similar experiences, Richard.
I have. Well, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, but my background before I ran an MSP was in corporate IT. And I started my sort of career, 17, 18 years old, working on the Helpdesk service desk of a large IT outsourcing company. And I credit that with, just being the foundations for everything that followed afterwards. As we talked about at the top of the call, I don't think customer service is just limited to the help desk or the service desk. I think it pervades just about every area, and the amount of times where we've come away getting a higher satisfaction rating from customers because something went wrong and we were given the opportunity to fix that thing. Whereas if everything just goes smoothly, you don't get that chance to shine. You don't get that chance to actually bond with the customer. So it's a sort of fascinating paradox, as you call it. Yeah,
it might be an old wives' tale, Richard, but there is a story I've certainly heard before from a couple of different people that talked about an alarm business who deliberately put a bug in their alarm service in some way about 11 months into a 12-month contract. So they come out and fix it. People were absolutely delighted with them, and guess what? Happy to renew. I believe they went to prison. So it's perhaps not the way to go, but it does prove the point. It's that natural human emotion of gratitude. Oh, you've got me out of a problem. You've solved something. I am so grateful for you doing that. I'll renew. I'll say thanks. I'll leave you a review. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, and so neither of us are suggesting that MSPs should fit anything that pushes that. It needs to come naturally, doesn't it? So, so talking of naturally, let's talk, if we may. You're the Helpdesk superhero here. You teach MSPs how to do this really, really well. Let's talk about some of the specific tools, techniques that they can use, to build the relationships with their customer. Let's start with the one that I think is the most difficult to learn. I don't know if you'll agree with me, and that's apologies for when you drop the ball, for when it's hit the fan, for when it is your fault. And I can tell you, as a consumer, I have fallen out with so many brands who do this incredibly poorly. They don't hold their hands up. They never say, I'm sorry. And no matter what follows from there on in, I treat them with suspicion, because I think this is not somebody who's trustworthy or honest enough to say, hey, we made a mistake. What can MSPs do if they drop the ball? How can they deal with apologies correctly?
Do all the things you just said, really, in short. I'm completely with you. Honesty, trustworthiness, there's such important things, but they have to be earned. It doesn't happen overnight. And people make mistakes, absolutely. And I think I think for me, there's probably a little sort of process to go through. The first one is, first of all, sometimes it's easy if you're accused of making a mistake just to go, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. But actually there is just that little pause point where you have to make sure of the facts. And I think that's something which is really, really important. So if someone is, there is a problem, someone is accusing you of causing the problem, I think the first thing to say is along the lines of, I'm really sorry there's an issue here, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, let's get hold of the facts here. Apologize for there being an issue, but perhaps don't go over the top and apologizing for the fact, you've caused the problem, because you may not have done, and that's entirely possible. But acknowledging there is a problem to start with is important. Then, if you like, gather the evidence, find out what's gone on, look at the logs, see what's happened. And if it's the customer that's caused a problem, or if it's another vendor that's caused a problem, I think that, so this is sort of tangible, a tangent to what you're saying, Richard, but I think that then it's not to blame others. I think that's important too. I think, so look, we've looked at everything that's gone on here. We've seen that this has caused an issue. And what we're going to do is we're going to contact that vendor. We're going to go and work with them to put it right. It's not, we haven't done it, but using the words like, well, it's not our problem, or, it wasn't our fault, that doesn't help either. That's a bad way of dealing with an issue. But then to follow through, if it's been, the evidence has been gathered and you have made a mistake, then I think it does come back to all the things that you were saying. It's that apology. It's not groveling. I think people can go too far. Actually, I think it's a phone call. If depending on the situation, it's not hiding behind an email. Yeah, really sorry, we've fixed it now. It's actually having the gravitas to call up. And look, is there anyone else I should be calling who this has impacted, just to say I'm sorry? That's a nice touch, because then immediately people are starting to think, wow, that's a really good way of dealing with this. And then what you do beyond that initial apology, I think, is down to the individual situation. So whether it's crediting someone, whether it's it's doing something in addition, I think that's kind of a gut feel, depending again on the situation that you find yourself in. But be bold, own up and have that face-to-face or phone call apology. Don't hide, because that's just a bit rubbish.
Yeah. And take control of it, take responsibility for it. Yeah. I think I was speaking to an MSP last week who was badly let down by a big distributor, and asked for advice. And the feedback that we gave them was like, own the situation. And then when the time is right, you can say, hey, the reason this happened is our distributor had this problem, but they're normally really good. We've now had a conversation with them and we've sorted that out, so it shouldn't happen again. But at the time, the client didn't want to know about whose fault it was. They just wanted the problem fixed and to be done with. Yeah. But it reminds, the opposite side of that is, I'm reminded of a really infamous politician's quote who got caught doing something wrong, and I can still remember the politician on TV said, I take full responsibility for this mistake, and the member of my team who was responsible will be punished for it.
I like that.
Let's move forward then. So we've looked at apologies. The other, and transparency is the key there, I think. Transparency over other issues as well. So MSPs have a scope of work in the type of thing that they deliver. Quite often I'm asked by MSPs what to do in the situation where a request comes in and it falls out of the scope of work, so it might be chargeable. Do you have any advice on how service desks can be empowered in that situation to say, hey, we're happy to help you with this, but it's going to be chargeable? Because the worst thing they can do, isn't it, of just press ahead with the work and then the client gets an unexpected bill.
Yeah, and I think, again, that every situation is going to be different there, isn't it? Sometimes it's pushing that scope a fraction. Sometimes it could be an entire work package, so clearly every situation is different. But empowerment of technicians, I think, is a really, really important thing. And sometimes tying people down. I mean, look, processes are absolutely critical. Of course they are. But actually allowing a little bit of flexibility at times, allowing people to make decisions, use their own natural language in replies. There's a whole bunch of things around that. But in that particular situation, I think quite often this comes down to communication and timeliness again. So perhaps if the technician has never seen this sort of thing before, because it might be a brand new situation, it's always, let's just acknowledge this straight away. So look, okay, got your request. I'll be honest, this falls a little bit outside the scope. Let me double check with a colleague and I'll let you know if we can squeeze this in, or I'll let you know a price. So you're immediately setting expectations. It could be that the end customer doesn't realize it's out of scope. It could be they know and they're pushing the boundary. So I think showing that clear knowledge of what the scope is and that it might be outside of it is a great starting point because it sets that expectation. And then I think it's a case of going to the relevant person and asking the question on who can make that commercial decision, and then coming back to them. But it's setting that expectation. I think is the key in the communication that goes on between the help desk and the client.
Yeah. Another common scenario that I see MSPs struggling to address is when they're bringing, as they need to do, junior members of staff, so young people into the business. And as you say, perhaps they're not technically trained, which doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be a good fit for a service desk. Let's be clear about that. But they may not know the answer to some of the incoming questions that are being asked. How can MSP owners, how can service desk managers train their members of staff to be, first of all, open and honest if they don't know the answer? Because we can all sniff it out, can't we, if somebody's just beating around the bush, doesn't really know. And secondly, how can they set clients' expectations that, hey, I'm not going to be able to answer this, but I'm taking responsibility and I'm going to find an answer for you?
So there's two scenarios, I guess, where that can crop up. First one is via email. So via ticket, a written ticket. The second one is over the phone. So if we take the second one first, let's talk about the phone. I can relate back to some of my experiences now, as help desk with customer thermometer, or as someone actually selling customer thermometer as well. I would get fired questions left, right, and centre. Sometimes quite technical. And I try and hold my own, Richard. But sometimes when someone talks about an IPsec compliance type survey, I scratch my head a bit because I just don't know. And my response, and I will encourage this, and I'm pretty certain this is included within the habit, if I think it is from memory, is the stock phrase I used to do, and it wasn't. It was authentic. It was like, that's a great question. I've never been asked that before. And it would have been the truth. It would have been a good question, and I wouldn't have been asked it before. Otherwise, I hope I would have known the answer. And it does a couple of things. First of all, it makes the client feel like they've asked something really intelligent, which they have, so it makes them feel good. But secondly, it just gives you room to breathe a little bit and say, look, I don't know the answer, but I do know someone that does. I'll be back to you within the hour or within 24 hours with a coherent response, which is exactly what you need. I'm not going to try and make this up. And I think if a technician is on the phone and that comes about, I think that is the perfect way of dealing with it. I really do. And there is nobody, unless they're perhaps not particularly sane, who is going to complain at that type of response. With email, with an email ticket, it's slightly different because it's asynchronous. You've got sort of time on your hands. But this also comes, I've mentioned the word a couple of times, timeliness. It's so important. So if someone has asked you something or has tried to request something, and it is beyond your own capability, and let's say you can't get with someone for a day, don't just leave it. They don't know you're working on it. They don't know you've seen it. Acknowledge it. Use similar words if you want to. Say, look, I've arranged a meeting with my colleague. I'm going to be back to you by 2:00 tomorrow with the right sort of response. Give people times, and no one's going to mind that. And what it does, setting those expectations mean that people can then plan their day. They're often coming to you, they need to get something done. And if they can't, they're on pause and it's frustrating. But if you tell them by 1:00 tomorrow, whatever it is, they can then plan. And that for me, someone who values time hugely is so important. Sorry, I'm rambling, but hopefully that was helpful.
No, it's absolute gold. It's fantastic. One of the best examples that I've seen of somebody doing this really, really well is Craig Sharp, who is a fellow tribal elder. And we'll talk about the fact that you're a tribal elder in the tech tribe. But every single month, Craig and I do a live Q&A for tribal members. And Craig and I have both been in the industry over 20 years. You know, you would have thought we'd know everything at this point, yet technology moves on. And Craig always gets a question in the tribal Q&A, how can I configure this firewall? And Craig holds his hands up and says, I don't know, but if you ask a question in the tribal forums and tag so-and-so, they'll be able to answer it for you. And I think it's marvelous. You know, Craig's just a genuinely good guy anyway, but the fact that he doesn't try and fluff around it, and it's not deflecting, it's pointing the person in the direction of the right answer. So, but talking about the Tech Tribe, so I mentioned it briefly. You're a fellow member of the Tech Tribe. You have given incredible value in the tribe. You've got to be known as Mr. Helpdesk there, you know, everything, a Helpdesk superhero, and recently promoted to a tribal elder as well.
Overwhelming, so, Richard. I am disappointed not to have some kind of necklace, but I'm going to fashion one out of paper clips at some point.
We could do that out of maybe the gold from chocolate coins and that, you know, you get at Christmas. Yes. I think we can build that one for you. So, but yeah, thanks for everything that you do in the Tech Tribe. Just wanted to throw that in there because it's an amazing community.
You know, I mean, I learn a lot from people, and I think what's most heartwarming, you know, particularly at the time we're in right now, you know, recording this in April 2020. The amount, and I think that just generally in this industry, I've worked in a number of industries, and it is mind-blowing the amount of cooperation, collaboration, community, call it what you will, co-opetition, there's another one I've learned recently, between fierce competitors in some cases, yet everybody in this industry seems to want to help each other out. And it's incredible. And I can't say it's unique, but it feels unique to me, and I love it. And Tech Tribe is a great place to see that really in action.
Yeah, very, very cool. We're very grateful for somebody, world-class expertise as you've got being in there and helping out. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the book then, because I can see you blushing at this point. One of the threads throughout the book is obviously around communication, but it's to do with phrasing. Now, we've already touched on a few different phrases there. Can you give any other examples of how tiny adjustments to phrasing can mean winning the day rather than falling flat on your face?
Yeah, I can. And actually, I'm gonna wiggle. If I wiggle my mouse on my PC behind me, hopefully these screens will come alive. You probably can't quite see them, but actually these are rotating. And there are, inside the online program, there are desktop wallpapers, which sounds very gimmicky. But it's not. It really does work as a reminder, as a reinforcement for the various habits. And the one behind me right now says, phrase correctly, be aware of your natural style. And then underneath that, it says you have to log out first with a strike through right the way across it. And it's an example of a phrase which, you know, if you are technically minded and you're not thinking about that human customer service element, it's very, very easy. And I have to tell you what, she'll never listen to this, but my wife is one, and she's the first to admit it, to write very directly. And she knows that. And she will always reread texts to friends because she can come across as sounding really quite harsh. She doesn't mean to. It just comes out in a very businesslike way. So the example behind me says, you have to log out first. So if you're trying to explain to someone how to do something, you have to log out first. It can come across as quite harsh. And just by using a few extra words before or after around, it can come across as quite different. So, in that particular instance, if you're already logged in, don't forget you need to log out first, and then you'll see an indication of that in the toolbar above. So actually it might sound to a technician completely over the top, but to perhaps a non-technical customer, it just sounds, okay, that's cool. That's really nice. And it's being very, very mindful of your audience. I'm a help desk right now in another venture that I have. It's a fitness venture. And I deal with a lot of people, sometimes, 60, 70 years of age, when it comes to subscriptions and adding credit card details and all the rest of it. And I've got really, really good. I'm trying to practice what I preach about rereading. And this is another technique, rereading those phrases and just thinking about, will that 65-year-old person understand I understand it, but will a 65-year-old person understand it? Or in an MSP's case, will a non-technical person understand, how to get a command prompt up? Can I put step 1, step 2, step 3? Can I separate some sentences? Can I put something in bold, just to make it super, super clear, to avoid that reply going, it's not working, I don't understand what you mean, and another 24 hours go by for the customer. So just reread the stuff and think about your audience, I think is absolutely critical.
Fantastic advice. And there is a number of examples of just that little tweaking phrases that you include throughout the book, which are gold dust in of themselves as well. Now, I just want to pick up on something you mentioned earlier on. We would be remiss if we didn't mention that any MSPs listening to this, not only can they pick the book up, which is, for me, an absolute no-brainer. I can't stress this enough. Go and pick this book up. It's absolutely essential to MSPs, anybody who does any type of customer service desk or anything else. But you've got the online training as well. So if anybody listening to this wants to find out more and perhaps go through a training course, tell us more about what that online training looks like.
Yeah, and you'll put the link in the show notes there, Richard, I'm sure. Yeah. And it's people learn in different ways. And when I wrote the book, I did it knowing that the core of the text there would form the basis for a script for the online program. And a lot of my background is video. Despite the face for radio, I've managed to do a few videos along the way, and so I was just passionate about turning this thing into something that was kind of alive and kicking, and it had a sort of a human face to it. So it's 60 odd modules, covers the 50 habits, and on top of that, I've mentioned there's about 70 odd desktop wallpapers in there, a bunch of other resources as well. And back end of 2019, we added a certification as well, really driven by customer demand, which was a brilliant thing to sort of rip it all out and start again. But I'm so pleased we've done it because people love working towards something. It's a certificate, a badge for your Outlook signature. But it just shows real progress. And what's really interesting too is that people are going through it in a couple of different ways. Box set binge, great for new recruits. That's really powerful. And then secondly, other people are going through it kind of as a team, taking a habit every week, perhaps, or a couple of weeks, whatever it may be, and using them in team meetings and, with discussion as well, and layering on habit after habit over time. And there's about 500 or so people who are now inside the program and members. Was hoping to make it 5,000 this year. We'll see what happens. It's interesting. There are certainly people still signing up at this tricky time, and I think some people have got more time on their hands. Some people have got less, and they're needing to ramp up the help desk. So everyone's in a different situation, but nonetheless, it's there. I'm incredibly proud of it, and there's a trial you can go and grab, and you can see a dozen or so other modules. And if you like what you see, you can grab some licenses for your team.
Yeah, and as you say, we'll include a link in the show notes here because you've been very kind in giving us a specific link for Tub Talk listeners, which we will absolutely include and make sure that they're looked after within that training as well. So we've already touched upon the fact that you are a successful entrepreneur. We talked about customer thermometer and all the other things that you've got going on, the training, the personal training and the gym and all that sort of stuff that you've got going on, which is a completely different podcast, isn't it? We could talk about the success that you're having there.
Fascinating.
But you've got your first book out, Helpdesk Habits, which has been an undeniably fantastic hit and got tons and tons of good feedback. But you're not resting on your laurels because you've got another book just around the corner. So hopefully by the time this podcast goes out, the book should either be available for pre-order or perhaps even launched. Tell us about the next book that's coming from the Copeland Empire. Yeah,
that's a very grand word, Richard. So touching on some of the words I've already used, the community sort of aspects of this incredible industry. Back in July of 2019, I thought, do you know what would be great? There's no one person that has all the answers and has all the knowledge here. How about I try and bring a whole bunch of people together into a single book? with their thoughts, their answers. And I thought, look, I can get 100 people together or so, in a month or two, I can crack this book out in 3 months. Jobs are good. And life doesn't work like that, Richard, as I'm sure you well know. So I wrote to somewhere in the region of 405 MSPs, and anyway, it's done now. I mean, I'm really, really proud of the results. So MSP Secrets Revealed has got 101 secrets spread across. I've already touched on recruitment, sales, marketing, operations, team management, some personal stories in there, a whole bunch of stuff. And I think in the end there was something like 88 contributors. So some of them are in twice. And I have to say it's been inspiring writing it. So it's a combination of people like your very good self submitting their thoughts and ideas, and I've done a little bit of an edit in some cases. That's probably around about half the submissions, and then the other half has been through interviews. So I've done that at conferences. On the plain old telephone service, if you remember that sort of thing, and Zoom and so on. And I've just been so inspired by the different things that have come out, and I'm really looking forward to getting it into the outside world. As you say, hopefully back end of April, very early May, depending on the mood of the world. But that's my plan, and I really hope it inspires. It really should do, because it's certainly inspired me.
Well, there's few books that I've seen that are due to come out that have got this degree of anticipation, because every MSPs that I speak to is like, this book's coming out. I want to read it. I want to see what's in it. So you've definitely built the desire for the book there. So I wish you all the best for it. And
thank you.
As soon as the book is released, we'll make sure to include it in the show notes for this podcast show.
Thanks, Richard.
as
Thank
well.
You.
So yeah, cool. Is there anything else that if you were me, I should be asking you at this point?
Oh goodness, I wish you'd brief me on that question. What's my favorite habit from the book? Just going back to Helpdesk habits briefly. So I'm now going to answer my own question with, I haven't really got an answer to that, which is pretty rubbish, isn't it? But there's one that stuck out, which I talk about when I speak and so on. And the reason it sticks out for me is because people stand up and take photos of the slide, and you're onto a good thing these days when people are taking photos of slides. And it's so simple. It's so simple. And I call it manage expectations. So I've made up a little word. So it's a combination of the word cue and expectations there. And it drives me insane, the number of, and this isn't just for MSPs, but it's for any number of industries, where you fire in a ticket via email or via a web form of some kind, and you get that automated response back, which looks like it's come from, Al the computer in the movie. It could have been written in binary. It's just so bad. It's so impersonal. And typically, if we come back to the MSP world and PSAs and so on, it's the default message which shipped with the system. And no one has ever thought to go in and change it. From the bog standard, we've received your request, we've allocated it a ticket number, and hash at the bottom, and it's like, this is horrible. So the habit, I guess this is perhaps not quite a habit; it's crowbarred in a little bit, but the tactic is to, when you've heard this, you think, hang on, that applies to us. Go in, find out how to change those default settings, and personalize it. Use a dear first name tag. Put a little bit of quirkiness in it, happy Monday, happy Tuesday, whatever it may be, and sign it off. This is the other thing, which is sign it off with a real name, not just the Helpdesk team, the technicians, whatever. Give it a real name, give it an identity. And so when people receive it, it's like, okay, they'll probably know it's auto-generated, but it's got some thought, and that's the human customer service. And I would suggest everyone who watches this emails you, Richard Tubb, on a Friday to see a brilliant example of this in action, because as I'm sure many of you will know, Richard doesn't work Fridays, Sure. And instead he puts a fantastic out of office on his email, which is super friendly. It's quirky and it's brilliant. Basically saying, I don't work Fridays. I'll be back to you on Monday. But I love emailing Richard every Friday just to see the message.
And poor Holly, my PA. Well, first of all, thanks for that, mate. Thanks for telling everybody in the MSP community to email me on a Friday. Poor Holly, my PA. Of course, I'm not there on a Friday for these deluge of emails that come in. Poor Holly, she gets tickled every single week when she responds to these emails on a Friday. But yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for your time today. For anybody who wasn't aware of your work before, I think after listening to this, they'll agree with me. You are a world-class expert at this customer service thing. You are a top bloke to boot as well. And we really, really appreciate that you're a part of the wider MSP community because you do so much good work. Thanks for your time today, mate. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Richard. And you know what? You're not so bad yourself. You keep doing what you're doing. It's great stuff.
Before we go, if anybody wants to continue the conversation with you, where can they find you on the interweb?
Follow the show note link there to Helpdesk Habits, and there's a contact form there, and they can absolutely drop me a line. It's not a big team. You're looking at him and a couple of other folks remote, so you'll easily get to me.
Fantastic. Mark, thanks for your time today, mate.
Thank you, Richard.
Hey folks, Richard here. Thanks for listening today. I know you've got a ton of options for who you listen to nowadays, so I really appreciate your support. Do you have any feedback on this episode? Ideas for future guests? Tweet me at Tublog using the hashtag TubTalk. I respond to every tweet and really appreciate your feedback. Richard here, and I wanted to give a really big shout out and to say a huge thank you to our friends at Avast for bringing this episode to you. In the face of increasingly complex threats targeting small and medium businesses, yesterday's methods are no longer enough. Cybersecurity must be quicker, smarter, and more reliable than ever before. Avast Business provide a range of powerful, easy to deploy security products and management platforms designed for IT solution providers and managed service providers. Avast Business offer a variety of cybersecurity products that are MSP friendly. You can choose from standalone antivirus products, managed antivirus products, cloud care for layered endpoint and network security services, backup and recovery, content filtering, email security, patch management, and a management console to easily deploy endpoint protection solutions to devices in your client networks. These solutions are all backed by the largest, most globally dispersed threat detection network in the world. If you've not checked out Avast's secure internet gateway, then I'd recommend taking a look at the video demo that Avast's Paul Fenwick and I recorded. It delivers a full security stack as a service that protects users wherever they go. With 30 years as a leading cybersecurity company and over 435 million active users of Avast products, if you haven't already taken a look at what Avast Business is offering, now might be the time. Visit tublog.co.uk/Avast for links to all the details. Hey team, this is Richard again. Just one more thing before you take off, and that is MSP Insights. Now, every Tuesday, I share my thoughts on the business of IT with you, the managed service community. Thousands of managed service providers already subscribe to MSP Insights. It's easy to sign up, easy to cancel. MSP Insights is basically a short email from me every Tuesday without fail with advice on growing your IT business, plus cool resources I've found, discovered, or started exploring that week. It's kind of like my diary of cool things and often includes articles or books I've read, tools I've discovered, and events I think you'd be interested in, often sent to me by my friends and Tub Talk podcast guests. So if that sounds fun, a short tiny bite of MSP goodness every Tuesday, and you'd like to try it out, just go to go.tub.co/Tuesday. That's go.tub.co/Tuesday. Drop in your email and you'll get the very next one. Thanks for listening.